So good morning, and I want to thank the great country of Hungary and my dear colleagues and friends and foreign experts for inviting me here today and giving me the honor to speak with you. My name is Jimmy Albrecht. I'm a professor now in New York City at Pace University, but I actually started my career in law enforcement, my 25-year career in law enforcement, as an auxiliary police officer with the New York City Police Department, before moving on to a 22-year career there, and then moving on to the ULEX mission in Kosovo. But again, I consider it a major honor to be here. The goal of my presentation will be to look at some international comparisons and also to make some final recommendations about effective programs. I've done a lot of research on different programs, including the program here in Hungary, which is very impressive. And I'd like to let people know what recommendations would make, or what best practices can be implemented to make sure that things work as effective as possible, and to ensure that the agency remains at the utmost levels of professionalism. So we know that when we look at public safety in general, that was a responsibility of the community at large. It wasn't really till industrialization happened in the 1920s, in the early 1800s, where we saw the overpopulation of big urban centers like London, Budapest, New York, Boston, and so on, that now we saw the need for a more professional model of policing. We were fortunate, and our colleague from the United Kingdom will tell you more about it. In 1825, Sir Robert Peel introduced this professional model of policing, with the guidelines, again, that the police are the public and the public are the police, meaning that really the police are essentially members of the community, and the community should be invoking their demands and their requests on the police, and the police should be open to those recommendations. Now we see a return because of budgetary cuts or maybe even conflicts during World War I, World War II, during the Cold War era. We saw the need for volunteers, and actually after, let's call it the new age era of unfortunate response to terrorism events, you have the need again for increased public safety and the introduction or the involvement of the community to engage and provide us information and support. So let's talk about different models that we have. In the United States, we start at all ages, and we include all members of the community. So we use school children. We have an Explore program where we start school children, very similar to what we refer to as the Boy Scouts, where we'll engage these teenagers basically in social events, sporting events, camping, and so on. But we also involve them in policing. We give them tours of the police station. They wear uniforms like we do. They spend time with us out on patrol. And it allows all members of the public, including minority representation, to actually be positively exposed to the police. Of course, we have the auxiliary police members, which is a more professional model, where you have people in recognizable uniforms serving the community. We involve our clergy, which are priests, imams, rabbis, and also Buddhist representatives to come in. We engage in direct dialogue with them. And the reason we do that in America is because we want the trust of the community. And who do the members trust? Sometimes they don't trust government, but the community trusts religious clerics a lot. So what we like to do is, as soon as an event happens, we brief the clergy and allow them to spread the true word, or the true information out, more accurate information out to the community, because they probably trust them more than they would government representatives. And then, we have the need for specialist volunteers. We have this big fight against cybercrime. That is those experts that can do these investigations very expensive. The United Kingdom has a great model where they have these cyber experts come in as unpaid volunteers to work a few hours a week to investigate these crimes. Helicopter pilots, costly field, very costly to train these personnel for it. Well, a lot of jurisdictions use volunteers to fly the police helicopters. Again, no need to be armed to do that. And then, just looking at some of the representatives we have up here, we try to introduce famous people. You can see the member on the bottom. He's a famous basketball player in America, one of the most famous, and he actually regularly engages in auxiliary police or volunteer policing in his community, which actually, again, paints the police in a more positive, more open picture. When it comes to another model that can be used that we look at, again, one of the issues that there's been a bigger move toward volunteers in policing is the cost reduction in budgeting, the budget for the police. So we looked at also what I refer to as hybrid models, where we take people that have certain qualifications or skills and we hire them as part-time or full-time employees, but they don't need, they would do jobs like, and you do that here in Europe, people doing traffic enforcement, parking enforcement, maybe school safety efforts where you don't need to be armed to do that, but they have that level of expertise and they're working in partnership with the police. So what are the positive aspects of engaging volunteers? Obviously, you're getting the community involved. You're increasing public safety. If you're looking at the younger generation, it's actually a trial period for both sides to see whether, if a youth is interested in policing, whether it's the Explore program or the auxiliary police, whether they're actually truly interested in a career in policing. And on the other hand, it gives you the capability to examine the backgrounds of these individuals to find out if they would fit into it too. So it's almost like a trial period you have before they would be hired as full-time personnel. Obviously, it's costly because you have to make an investment, but they're not getting salary, generally speaking, but there are costs involved, which is now the challenges. When you're looking at a volunteer policing program, you have to make that initial and continuous investment into the program, into screening these personnel to make sure that they don't have criminal records, that they're mentally, emotionally, psychologically stable. You have to provide them the initial training. You have to continue to provide in-service training to them. These are all costs. You have to provide some type of equipment to them. But again, the rewards are there. In America, we have the issue with police unions. So in certain jurisdictions where there's union presence, they're against using volunteers in policing because they think that it's taking money out of their pocket. So in jurisdictions like Germany or in America, there's been a lot of reservation or lack of support from the unions for police volunteers, whereas we look at them as being very cost-effective and actually effective in increasing public safety. And the big thing is, the European is faced with this as much as America is. We want to engage the public as much as possible. And we don't want to just engage the majority population. We want to engage the minority populations. I drove through here on the bus today. I've been to Budapest, fortunately, many times, probably 10 times already. I love the city. It's an international city. You guys have the refugee, I don't want to call it situation, but stress to engage them. You have to somehow push to gain their trust. Many of them come from countries where the military and the police are looked at negatively. So now you have to get them on your side now. And what better way to do that than to recruit them to be part of your community patrol? And it may not be, we have restrictions in New York too, that you have to be a legal resident, you have to be a citizen and so on. But they could be a screening process, and you can get these people involved, and they now could act as your outreach to the Syrian community, to the Iraqi community, to the Albanian community, whatever it is. And they actually could act as interpreters too, or liaisons between the police out there. Because what you want to gain their trust, and once you have their trust, guess what you get? You got a lot of information back from them too. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. So, here are some of the questions you have to answer, and I just finished writing a book about using volunteers in policing. This is just a short list of them, but you gotta, start asking yourself, do you have the budgetary capabilities of funding the screening process, the training, properly equipping these personnel, not only initially, but ongoing? What kind of screening process are you gonna use? How in-depth is it going to be? Is it going to be tiered? I'll talk about the tiered levels later on. But meaning that, are you going to have a certain screening process for people, for maybe immigrant populations where you just want to do a basic check on them, whereas if you're going to raise up to the auxiliary police level, you have a more intensive screening process and so on. But that has to be identified. What commitment do you want? We're very clear in America that if you're going to be an auxiliary police officer, we expect you to serve in the city of New York 144 hours a year. You know, in some jurisdictions, they want more from that. And most of the personnel actually serve longer than that. But you want to make that clear that this is not just giving you a uniform and a police identification of some sort, and you can do what you want. No, we expect something back. We're making an investment in you. We want our investment to come back to a certain level. Will your people have, will these volunteers have enforcement powers? I know here in Hungary and in New York City, both, they don't have enforcement powers, and they are not armed with a firearm. Some jurisdictions across the world do both. So you have to keep that in there. And what is the liability associated with arming volunteers and also with giving them arrest authority? What kind of quality control measures are you going to do to make sure that they're properly trained, they're certified, that you continue, again, if people make allegations against your volunteers, how is that going to be investigated? You want to make sure you have a process there. And what happens if they get injured? You know, they're serving their community. You can't just have a situation. I worked 3 years in Kosovo. If a police officer gets, and these are professional police officers, if a police officer gets injured there, he gets fired and he has no benefits. That's ridiculous. You know, and now you have people who are volunteering to serve for the public good, for public safety. What kind of benefits will they get if they're injured while they're working? Do you anticipate any type of benefits, maybe retirement benefits later on, where something there, or maybe tax benefits where they incur a reduced tax structure for the time that they serve, or maybe if they do 10 years, there's type of benefits. But these things have to be analyzed and maybe reviewed and outlined in some type of legislation. What kind of motivators are you going to give them? Again, we know as cops, particularly in America, I'm very proud to have been a cop. I'd go back tomorrow if I could. I love being a cop because I'm serving the public. And I took the job to help people. Unfortunately, the media often paints the police in a bad light. And, you know, how am I going to motivate my personnel? You know, how do I do that? And these are volunteers. And you have to come up with measures there. Most of the stuff we do in policing, I can't give someone a raise, generally speaking. I can actually recommend a promotion. But what I can do, I mean, for professional police officers, is recognize them. And there should be some type of, you know, recognition process where you know, maybe the auxiliary police officer of the month, the auxiliary police officer of the year. If you do so many hours, you get some type of award recognition. But you want to do something so that they're recognized for this commitment they make, because they're doing it really for nothing out of their own goodness, and that should be acknowledged. So I'm going to do just a quick contrast here, and again, I'm going to go through this very quickly because I'd like to get to my conclusions. But when you look at the different programs across the globe, and I've only listed a couple here, but the NYPD auxiliary police officers, they're in full uniform, just like their colleagues. They do not carry a firearm, they carry a nightstick. But the uniforms are very similar. They're no different, other than the badge is a star rather than a traditional police badge, and the word auxiliary is over their patch. Contrasted to Los Angeles Police Department, Los Angeles Police Department has a three-tier system that's outlined by state law. But they are actually, at the highest levels, they're armed. They wear the same uniforms as regular police officers. And they actually have arrest powers. But there's a bigger investment put into them, which I'll talk about in a bit. Then you look at in the United Kingdom, the Special Constabulary. They have a very long history. They're a very proud movement. There's a lot of professionalization and a lot of research going on right now in the United Kingdom on how to make that model better, including how to motivate these people that are doing a great job. And in the United Kingdom, since most police officers aren't armed, special constables are not either, but they have full police powers. So again, you can get a lot out of the use of these volunteers and dramatically increase public safety if you use them effectively. And when you talk about smaller jurisdictions, I'm going to surprise you. You're fortunate here. You have a national police in Hungary. We have over 18,000 different police agencies in America. Most of them are localized. Some police departments are only one officer, all the way up to 36,000 in the NYPD. But the smaller ones tend to use volunteers, which we refer to generally as reserves, effectively. They train them, they hire them, they provide them with firearms because they don't have the budget to hire personnel. I went up to Canada and met with some Canadian mounted police. This goes back about 20 years. And there was one officer, but he was supplemented by 3 or 4 volunteers that were out there. And that's where a lot of smaller jurisdictions actually get by, because there's not the money to move on to hiring 4 people, and you have to rely on the volunteers. And you're fortunate here that your system is very effective and very professional. So I'm just going to go through all these slides very quickly. LAPD has a 3-level system, all the way from people that do administrative duties that are unarmed, and all the way up to fully armed personnel, fully uniformed with police powers. But it all depends on how much training they receive, how many hours of training they receive. They have to be regularly trained and certified annually. So you have a variation there, and that's all based on California state law. When you look at the NYPD, we transitioned from the Civil Defense Corps during the Cold War to the Auxiliary Police Section. But when you look at what we do in the NYPD, I have to honestly say, having been an auxiliary police officer and having served 20 years, retiring as a regional commander, the auxiliary police in New York City are underutilized and underappreciated. There's a bunch of people that want to make this commitment, but we're not using them to the extent that they could. I did use them because, again, I was a former auxiliary police officer. I used them very effectively, and I used them at the same level, recognizing their abilities at the same level as my officers, and they appreciated that. But they get very little training, and they have no enforcement powers. Pretty much they've been obligated to be the extra eyes and ears and merely report what's going on there. They don't have arrest powers and so on. And you can see that there's some restrictions. You want to make sure that all members of the community are properly represented. But if you're going to make it only for United States citizens, that's not always good. So we've added the level where you can be a permanent resident, which means that you're legally within America. But we want representation from all the communities across the city. And of course, we're probably the most diverse city in the world. There's some obstacles, though. Again, we have a very strong union. And the union actually went to court and blocked certain, or placed restrictions, legal restrictions on police officers. So police officers can't make arrests. They can't go to dangerous situations. They have to patrol in twos. And very rarely will you see a police officer and an auxiliary police officer working together. Under my watch, when I was the commander, we worked always together. But most police personnel don't recognize that as such. They can do traffic control duties, but they can't do traffic enforcement. A lot of restrictions, unfortunately, again, underutilized. One thing that I promoted with my colleague Ross Wolf, who does a lot of research, he's also a chief in the Orlando area, police chief, reserve police chief in the Orlando area. Since the terms volunteer, auxiliary, reserve are so interchanged, when we're talking about those concepts, we came up with level 1, level 2. We came up with different level recognition. So if you spoke about the auxiliary police program here in Hungary, you would be level 2. And the NYPD would be level 2. In LAPD, the level 3, they would be level 5, but they would be level 1 if they just had administrative tasks and so on. So it makes it easier to understand interchangeably and globally. So when you're talking about funding, I was asked to talk about funding here, and I can tell you, having listened to the colleagues earlier today, you guys are doing it the way you're supposed to be doing it. It has to be done professionally. It has to be done with the highest integrity, and it should be centrally controlled. Because, again, when you're dealing with money can disappear very easily, as you know, when you look at different situations across the globe. So you've done a great job here by having a central control of any type of budgeting, but you do reach out for grants. We have the capability in America to get corporate grants, private grants, NGO grants, state grants, and also federal grants to support these community programs, and that helps. But I can also see you did when you're having these training type of conferences where you do this stuff, you can get private corporations here, and you've done a great job, very impressive job, getting these sponsors coming out, because this is very well conducted conference here. But you can do that. But again, there has to be oversight over that funds, because you don't want to have the appearance of impropriety, of special interest, getting special treatment and so on. It has to be done with the utmost of ethics. And finally, my recommendations. First of all, I think positively of using volunteers. The move is there. It started, again, really in the 1990s. There was a resurgence after the September 11th attack with this fight against terrorism across Europe and the United States and across the globe. We know that it's a very effective way, cost-effective and effective way in increasing public safety. What you want to do is get the community involved, and we want all representatives of the community to feel comfortable. So that's why I say the biggest push, it shouldn't be majority people, like only ethnic Hungarians that are members of the auxiliary police. It should be represented from all across the international community that reside here. They should be given that opportunity. If you have restrictions on that somehow, you should work out some type of system, because you want these interested community members, concerned community members to engage with you, and you want them to outreach to their colleagues, that they can feel comfortable and safe with the police here, that they can trust the police here too. If you don't want to research all these different options yourself, there's plenty of models out there that you can steal or borrow from somebody. In jurisdictions where there's unions, I don't know if you have that situation here, doesn't seem to be reservations or distancing between the police and the auxiliary police here in Hungary, fortunately, but we have that situation in the U.S. and even the United Kingdom. There's some reservations because everyone thinks, particularly the unions or the police associations, you're taking money out of my pocket because these volunteers are involved. No, we're making the police officers safer because these volunteers are there to help them, and we're making the community safer too, which means their job is easier, and that's the way you have to look at it. When you're looking about training and recruitment, you got to make sure that you maintain professional standards with auxiliaries. They have to be, again, properly screened and properly trained for their level of expertise, meaning if they're going to be armed and have arrest powers, you better make sure that they're properly trained in the law and in properly using a firearm. Again, you want to protect yourself against liability. In order to make the most out of this opportunity, you might want to have a tiered program. You have the auxiliary police, again, very effective unit. Maybe you want to look at, and maybe you have already, developing a community patrol that allows non-citizens population to actually become engaged and help with these community patrol. Obviously, maybe different signature, uniform, identification, but still, the whole goal is to get as many members of the community involved in public safety as possible. And I'll end up with this thought, that really, if you make a quality investment, as you guys have here in Hungary, into your program, you're going to get a quality product back. And that quality product will result in higher public safety, higher citizen trust, and again, more assistance to the professional police officers that are working across the country. And before I wrap up, I just want to promote, obviously, my book here, and I'm proud to say that Kardos Pál, our dear colleague right up here, contributed one chapter to the book. He actually did an excellent job with his colleague Bea Azoke on actually writing about the effective program that you have here. But if you want to look at some international programs, and I'm not here to sell my book, but just to provide information about looking at the different programs across the globe. And with that said, I don't know if we have time for questions. If we don't have time for questions now, I'll gladly make myself available. I'm here till Sunday afternoon. I'll be in Hungary for a few days. I'm going to be visiting some friends there. So please feel free to stop me at any point and ask me any questions. But once again, I thank you for this great opportunity, and I look forward to making new friends while I'm here at this conference. Thank you very much. Kissing them.